Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to our program, A Day of Stolpersteine Dedications. I am Marlene Yahalom, and it is my honor to serve as the Director of Education for the American Society for Yad Vashem. The American Society for Yad Vashem was established in 1981 by its founding chairman, Eli Sborowski, of blessed memory. The American Society works in partnership with Yad Vashem in efforts of Holocaust commemoration and education, and provides support for special projects and capital improvements. Our current chairman, Lenny Wilf, and our executive director, Stanley Stone, sustain and continue the legacy of the organization. The American Society for Yad Vashem is proud to work in partnership with Yad Vashem for the past 39 years to further the cause of Holocaust remembrance. We are also proud of our work during these challenging times. We continue to be active during the COVID-19 crisis, and we continue to provide resources to promote Holocaust awareness to our membership and extended community of supporters. We do this through online programs, webinars, lectures, and conferences. We encourage you to learn more about our organization by joining us on November 8th, 2020 for our annual tribute dinner, and on March 7th, 2021 for our 23rd annual ARFA conference on Holocaust education. Please visit our website, yadvashemusa.org, for more details. We thank you all for joining us today. While we may not be together in person, we hope you and your loved ones are healthy and safe, and to those in need, may all your prayers be heard and answered. We are grateful to have the opportunity to offer you a meaningful program about the Kalter's family's efforts to commemorate their family members who perished in the Holocaust. It is a privilege for me to coordinate such an important effort with my colleague, Amy Cooper, National Campaign Director, Sven Trachmann, Senior Project Manager, City of Leipzig, Office of International Affairs, and of course, Craig Kalter, son of a Holocaust survivor who created a wonderful film to memorialize a family trip to his ancestors' town in Leipzig, Germany. He embraced the Stolperstein project to honor the family he lost, as well as those who survived, a total of 24 family members. Our program today is about the important initiative made by the Kalter family to memorialize family members who perished in the Holocaust and through the Stolperstein. The small cobblestone memorial stones in urban spaces which are dedicated to individual victims of Nazism. The Stolperstein project began in the early 90s through the work of Gunther Demnig, and the Stolperstein are considered one of the largest decentralized Holocaust memorials. As of December 2019, 750,000 Stolperstein blocks have been installed. Each stone is part of a vast commemoration landscape. The project is intended to remember each victim as an individual. The text of each stone includes a victim's name, date of birth, and date and location of death, thereby bringing the people back to memory. These stones are intentionally placed in front of the last known address where a victim lived of their own free will, before they were forced to leave, deported, or murdered. The lives of the victims, and not just how their lives ended, are honored. The Stolperstein also serve as an educational tool to educate and raise awareness of the Holocaust and promote an understanding of what was lost, rather than how the destruction took place. Restoring a human face to the victim is similarly paramount to Yad Vashem's mission of Holocaust remembrance. Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center, is the forefront of efforts to safeguard the memory of the Holocaust and document the event for present and future generations. Since its inception in 1954, among its multiple objectives and triumphs, Yad Vashem has worked to preserve the memory of the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust by collecting their names, the ultimate representation of a person's identity. The archives at Yad Vashem house the largest collection of Holocaust documents in the world, over 210 million pages of documentation. These materials encompass different aspects of the Holocaust narrative. The goal is to present Jewish people as human beings with discernible identities. By learning about each victim, their name, where they lived, and each individual fate, the human face of the victim and subsequently of the community is restored, remembered, and commemorated. The Kalter family's initiative to create a lasting tribute to their relatives who perished in the Holocaust is a stellar example of putting a face to a Holocaust victim. By installing the Stolperstein and dedicating them to his lost relatives, Craig Kalter created a source of living memory for these Holocaust victims, and in turn, an educational resource for any community that has the Stolperstein Memorial cobblestone blocks. What a beautiful and lasting tribute to the Kalter family. Looking ahead, each stone also invites those who see it to stop and contemplate and perhaps inspire their own humanity and connection to others, which is crucial for the prevention of future atrocities. In a moment, we will have the privilege of hearing from Craig Kalter and Sven Trachmann. Following their remarks, Amy Cooper, our National Campaign Director, will moderate our question and answer session and then give closing remarks. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. All attendees have been muted. We received several questions in advance and we will get to those first. If you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function by clicking at the bottom of your screen, directing your question to the panelists. We will aggregate the questions we receive, and the panelists will answer as many as they can within our time frame. Before we welcome Craig Kalter and Sven Trachmann, please permit me to share their bios with you. Craig Kalter, the son of Holocaust survivors, has a passion for film and for photography. After several years as marketing director overseeing the licensing of the intellectual property of Columbia Pictures, Craig launched his own licensing company. His passion for film and photography was an important catalyst in helping create the film to memorialize a family trip to his ancestors' town in Leipzig, Germany. Sven Trachmann is the Senior Project Manager of the Office of the International Fair, City of Leipzig. A native of Leipzig, he earned his PhD in 2020, congratulations, Sven, with a degree in political science with a focus on international institutions. Since 2013, he is the co-organizer for the Visitors Program for former Jewish Leipzigers and their descendants. And now it is my privilege to welcome Craig Kalter and Sven Trachmann. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlene. I'm pleased to be here today on this webinar with Yad Vashem to talk about my film, A Day of Stolpersteine Dedications, and the Stolperstein Memorials. I want to thank each of you for watching the film to get insight into the Stolperstein Memorial and how my family suffered immensely during World War II due to the Nazi reign of terror. The film illustrated how each member within our family was impacted differently and how each one had their own story to tell. I'm glad that Yad Vashem recognized the film's unique message and expressed the interest in including it in their film archives and library. During the webinar, I will share with you some of the distinctive attributes that the Stolperstein Memorial provides and how municipalities such as Leipzig have embraced the Stolperstein Memorial to commemorate those victims and remind everyone of the horrors that took place during the Holocaust. Each of the victimized citizens were a very integral part of their communities before the Nazi regime forever changed the cultural landscape of many parts of Europe. Before I start with the Stolperstein presentation, I want to acknowledge my dad. When my contact at Yad Vashem, Amy Cooper, and I decided to work with one another on the premiere of the film, we discussed strategies and the webinar. Fortuitously, unbeknownst to me at the time, we selected August 9th for the date of the webinar. This date just happened to coincide with the week of my father's yahrzeit, commemorating his death in August 2001. His Hebrew calendar yahrzeit date is the 23rd of Av in 5761, which corresponds this year to Thursday, August 13th, 2020. I will light a yahrzeit candle this upcoming Wednesday night, August 12th, and it will burn for 24 hours. I also participated in a Zoom minyan yesterday on Shabbat, saying the Mortis Kaddish in his honor. Those are two of the ways to observe a family member's yahrzeit. And the third is to offer tzedakah in the memory of that loved one. In recognition of my dad, Joachim Kalter, I will make a contribution to Yad Vashem in support of their exemplary efforts in honoring and remembering all of the victims of the Holocaust and supporting my personal efforts in conjunction with honoring him and my family through my film, A Day of Stolpersteine Dedications. I will now share with you the presentation I created to provide each of you a lot more background on the Stolperstein Holocaust memorials. Just please bear with me 1 second. I'm trying to, okay, I had to minimize certain different windows in order to be able to have the presentation visible at the same level. Okay, so. Okay, when was Stolperstein first created? In 1991, the artist Günter Demnig created a memorial on the 50th anniversary of the deportation of the Sinti and Roma victims of the Holocaust in Cologne, Germany. After the ceremony, an elderly woman asked what it represented, and Günter stated it was a memorial to the gypsies who were victims of the Holocaust. That was 46 years after the Holocaust had ended, and the elderly woman said she doubted that gypsies had ever resided in her community. This response compelled Günter to create Stolperstein, a huge memorial throughout Europe to honor the Holocaust victims and their communities so their memory would not be lost forever. What is a Stolperstein? The German word Stolperstein translates from English into stumbling stones. Commemorative Stolperstein have been placed in many cities throughout Europe to honor the victims of the Holocaust. That includes those both who were killed as well as those who survived. In 2014, my wife Bonnie and I were in Prague, and we noticed Stolperstein honoring Holocaust victims in Prague's Jewish quarters. Each Stolperstein gives a personal identity to that victim. So we are no longer just remembering them collectively as Holocaust victims, but now we're honoring them as an individual who is part of the fabric of that community. This personal connection to the victim's identity is one of the most important commemorative attributes of the Stolperstein Memorial. Who can be honored with a Stolperstein? A Stolperstein commemorates anyone persecuted and or murdered by the Nazi regime. And that includes Jews and Sinti and Roma, who I've just mentioned, but it also includes Jehovah's Witnesses, deserters, homeless, prostitutes, the mentally or physically disabled, and people persecuted for their political views, their religion, the sexual orientation, or for the color of their skin. Our survivors honored alongside their deceased family members with a Stolperstein. Stolperstein are not only placed for people who died, but also for survivors. For example, in front of one's former home, a single Stolperstein might be placed for a woman who survived Auschwitz alongside two additional Stolperstein, one for each of her parents who unfortunately did not survive. This reunites the family. Stolperstein can also be placed for people who left their homes and escaped the Nazi terror, like going to Palestine, to South America, or to other parts of the world. Günter Demnig who you see featured, okay, in the left part of the screen, he created the Stolperstein program. And here he created 24 Stolperstein for my family, but we see just 5 of them from my immediate family, and they're being held, okay, by my 2 kids, my sister, and my wife is alongside me. My father, Joachim Kalter, survived World War II, as did his brother, Herbert Kalter. Okay. By enduring the hardships of the concentration camps. Their father, Oskar Kalter, was killed at Auschwitz in December of 1943. Their mother, Clara Kalter, was killed at Belzec in November of 42. Records show that their brother Manfred survived the war, but no family member ever reconnected with him after the war, and the date of his death is still unknown. Here, the Kalter family are all reunited. The 2 survivors, okay, from the war, okay, and the 3 who unfortunately perished from 2 during the war and 1 immediately thereafter, okay, and they're reunited together, okay. In 2017, okay, Rachel Kabersky and Sonia Kalter Glassman with their children had a Stolpersteine dedication in Leipzig, Germany, at the former home of Baruch and Hannah Kalter, their grandparents, my great-grandparents, who had both died in Tarnow and victims of the Holocaust. When Rachel and Sonia shared their pictures with my sister, okay, we had decided to coordinate an event of 24 Stolpersteine dedications for the other members of the Kalter and Hilsenrath family that had to leave their Leipzig homes. Here, you get to see Baruch and Hannah's former home in Leipzig, Germany. Okay, so now you might ask, if Baruch and Hannah Kalter died in Tarnow, Poland, okay, where they were sent by the Germans, why are there Stolperstein honoring them in front of their former home in Leipzig, Germany? The Stolperstein are usually placed in front of a victim's last home of choice. Baruch and Hannah were deported to Tarnow, Poland, so that was not their last home of choice, whereas Leipzig, Germany was. But Stolperstein can also be placed in front of a school, university, synagogue, or place of work where the honored victim spent much of their lives. There are Stolperstein in the following 25 different European countries. And what's interesting here, okay, there's actually 3 countries listed here: Switzerland, Spain, and Sweden. And those 3 countries were neutral, okay, during the war, yet there were victims and there are Stolperstein in those specific territories, those specific countries. Okay. Each Stolperstein is inscribed in its local language with the person's name, the year of birth, the deportation, the concentration camp, and date of death, if known, into the brass plate. This is the English translation of a Stolperstein inscribed in Czech in Prague, Czechia. Here, you could say it says, Zidil Zil, this means lived here, Emil Rubacek, born 1894, deported 1943 to Theresienstadt. Okay, he was murdered, okay, at Auschwitz. Okay. Following Hitler's euthanasia decree in 1939, Arthon was selected as one of 6 euthanasia centers in the Reich. Between May of 1940 and December of 1944, approximately 18,000 people, physically and mentally disabled, were killed at the Hartheim Castle by gassing and lethal injections as part of the T4 euthanasia program. Manuel Pons, who fled Spain's civil war in 1939, was one of those victims. He was captured by the Nazis in 1941 in France. This is the English translation of one of the 3 Stolperstein inscribed in Catalan in Menorca, Spain. Lived here, Manuel Marquez Pons, okay, born 1908, exiled 1939, deported 1941 to Mauthausen, then to Gusen, murdered December 9th, 1941 at Hartheim. This is the English translation of my father's Stolperstein inscribed in German in Leipzig, Germany. Lived here, Joachim Kalter, born 1923, Polonok shown 1938, which forced them to deport. They were deported through Byton, okay, which was known as Butlin in 1938. Okay, the first concentration camp that he was in was Pushkow. He was then eventually moved to Auschwitz in 1944. In 1945, to Buchenwald, and then he was liberated. Each local municipality determines if it wants to support the Stolperstein program. Why are Stolperstein memorials needed? Why support the Stolperstein program when there are already so many Holocaust memorials? Of significant importance to the memory of the Holocaust are the various Holocaust memorial museums, such as Yad Vashem, U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, and several others, each providing an enormous amount of historical records which are essential to educate everyone about the atrocities of the Holocaust. But in addition, of equal importance are the urban Holocaust memorials, where one commemorates a specific event of World War II or person impacted by such events, providing historical reference within each of those European communities. The Berlin Holocaust Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe. Okay, Berlin created one of the most visited Holocaust memorials globally. It is situated just a few hundred meters from Hitler's Führerbunker, former headquarters of the Nazi regime at the end of World War II. They are both located just a few minutes walk from Brandenburg Gate and are part of Berlin's urban landscape to remind everyone of the evil that was perpetuated in Berlin during World War II. You can walk through the Holocaust Memorial, but are not permitted to climb on any of the rectangular blocks. Berlin, the Sinti and Roma Holocaust Memorial. It's located within the Tiergarten, Berlin's most popular park. This is the Sinti and Roma Holocaust Memorial, and it honors 400,000 Sinti and Roma victims of the Holocaust. Now, if you look here at the front, you can see here's Mauthausen and other different camps, concentration camps, where many of the Sinti and Roma victims, were persecuted and killed. Budapest, the Shoes on the Danube Bank Memorial, honoring the Jews who were killed by the fascist Arrow Cross militiamen in Budapest during World War II. The Jews were ordered to take off their shoes and were shot at the edge of the water so that the bodies fell into the river and were carried away. The memorial highlights the victims' shoes that were left behind on the river banks. It is located on a popular Buddhist promenade, just a few minutes walk from the Hungarian parliament. The Minsk Yama Memorial. On this location, on March 2nd, 1942, the Nazi forces shot 5,000 Jews from the Minsk ghetto. Yama means ditch in Russian, and it refers to the mass grave of the 5,000 Jews. The Minsk Ghetto Pit Memorial is located within a park in a residential community. Stolperstein's urban Holocaust memorials. Almost every Holocaust memorial is determined and funded by the country and or local municipality. Stolperstein needs to be sanctioned by the municipality as a program, but once they approve, the victim's family can arrange its own private dedication, a distinctive attribute of its Holocaust memorial program. Helen Epstein, renowned author of Children of the Holocaust, had Stolpersteine dedications in Prague, Czechia, for her mother, Francie Rabinik Epsanova, who survived, and her mother's parents, her grandparents, Emil Rabinik and Josifa Rabinkova, who were both killed at the Mali Trastanets concentration camp near Minsk. Stolperstein's urban memorials provide a personal connection. My sister and I never met our father's parents, our grandparents, Oscar and Clara Kalter. To personally honor both of them with our father and his two brothers ceremonially in front of their home in Leipzig, Germany, was a unique feature of the Stolperstein Memorial Program that was priceless. It's for this reason I would recommend to anyone who has had family members who were victims of the Holocaust that they strongly consider having a Stolperstein dedication for them in front of their former family home. There are currently over 75,000 Stolperstein honoring Holocaust victims in over 1,000 different European municipalities. The majority of the 75,000 Stolperstein that have been dedicated are honoring Jewish victims of the Holocaust. Each of these Stolperstein are located in what were once thriving Jewish communities throughout Europe. In many of these cities, there's very little trace of the once thriving Jewish community. This is why the Stolperstein Project has so much purpose: to keep the memory of the 6 million alive, as well as honor all of the survivors, many of whom endured unimaginable horrors. Okay, I'd now like to be able to, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to be able to hand the baton over to Sven, and he'll be able to talk about the importance that this whole program has to Leipzig and what they're doing to be able to bridge the connection between the survivors, the families, and the town where unfortunately they were forced to leave. Sven?
Hello, everybody. It's a great honor to speak here today on behalf of the city of Leipzig. Thanks to Greg for giving this introduction to the Stumbling Stone project, to the whole idea. Your whole family back to Leipzig. Those who survived, those who didn't survive, and those who passed away in recent years, as well as the rest of the family. Greg told you a lot about the idea of stumbling stones in general, and I would like to talk a bit more about how the Stumbling Stone project is done in Leipzig. In Leipzig, there's a working group that is supported by the city of Leipzig, but which consists mainly of volunteers. So it's historians, it's people representing churches, it's people from civil society organizations, it's political activists who engage in the stumbling stones. And they together prepare the layings, they plan, they have the contact to the artists. And they are also working together with different schools. So there are different ways of how a stumbling stone can be dedicated. Sometimes a family is connecting the working group and says, well, I researched the whole history of my family. Can we place a stumbling stone? Then it goes quite fast, but sometimes not so much is known about what happened to the descendants, to the great parents, to a cousin, to whoever. And then usually the Stumbling Stone group is working together with schools, and they're having a school project. So a group of pupils or a class is taking part in this project. They get a name and some biographic dates, and then they together research the individual story of a victim. They go to the archives, they try to see what can be learned about the life of a victim before the Shoah. They try to connect to descendants of a victim or of a survivor. So with an individual story, the idea is to get an impression of the huge amount of crime that was committed during the Shoah. And I think especially for pupils, it's hard to imagine what it means to kill 6 million Jews in an industrialized way. But when they see an individual story, when they see first steps of persecution, how shops have been closed, how people lost their home, how they've been deported, how they were sent to concentration camps, how more and more legislations were in the everyday life, and then also how an individual person, where they have a face, where they have a name, where they have a story, was killed, then young people get at least an idea of what happened and what was committed by the National Socialists and by Germany in these times. So for us from the city of Leipzig, it's one important way to remember what happened to our dear citizens, what happened to the city when they lost a whole part of the community, when they lost social activities, when they lost social life, when they lost neighbors and so on, and friends. So that's one way how the city is contributing to remember and to honor the victims. And maybe further on in the discussion, I can explain a little bit what else the city is doing. We are running a visitors program for survivors and their descendants. We have a biannual Jewish week where we celebrate Jewish life in present, but where we also remember Jewish life in the past. There are different memorial activities and so on. And I hope we can discuss it a little bit further. And I'm very happy that so many members of the Kalter family, but also other former Leipzigers, people who are connected to Leipzig, are joining the talk today. And I'm looking forward to comments, questions, and the discussions. Thank you very much.
Amy, so you're going to be going through the questions?
I am.
Okay.
First of all, I just want to thank you both and Marlene for this really very interesting and inspiring presentation. We have a couple of questions. The first question I have is for Craig. And I was wondering, the question is, can you talk a little bit more about how you decided to engage in this project in particular to commemorate and memorialize your family?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Okay. Thank you for the question. It started out where, similar to what I just shared in the presentation, when we saw my great-grandparents be honored, okay, with the Stolperstein, I felt that we should do something. My sister felt, and actually my sister approached me, and she says, wouldn't it be nice if we did something for Dad? And I said, that's wonderful, but why don't we do something a little richer so we can be able to share it with some of our relatives and survivors' children, okay? So we reached out and tried to assemble a very large team, and we were very fortunate. We had people come from California, from Israel, from Florida, from New York, and we all went, and we had 13 individuals. But that was the project that took a lot amount of work in terms of coordinating, okay, with Germany. But then a client of mine knows that I love doing photography and film, and he says, you're going to do it, because I shared with him that we were going to be doing this specific dedication. And he said, Craig, you're not going to be doing your own photography and video. You're going to be so busy. Why don't you actually hire somebody? So as a result of his recommendation, I then reached out, and I was fortunate, okay, to find a specific videographer, Ashley, who works, okay, in Berlin. And she came from Berlin to Leipzig, and she was with us for 2 days, and she filmed all of the specifics. And when I retained her services, it was pretty much going to be for a personal commemoration for the 13 of us who went there to honor, okay, our family members. As I started working on the project, it took so much initiative to be able to educate each little detail that it started becoming hours and hours of time. And then I said, okay, let me see if I could make this even larger than just a small family video. And that's when I decided, when it was completed, that I thought it could be shared to many, many, many more people beyond our family, because I thought it's a very good illustration of what one family went through, how one family commemorated, and how we were able to embrace the Stolperstein Project Memorial and be able to implement this whole program. So it wasn't from the beginning where I thought I was going to be doing this. It was sort of in transition. It became an evolution to be able to reach this stage.
Oh, kavod. The next question is for Sven. And it is, what is the relationship between the municipality, its former citizens and descendants, and your current population?
it was just after the reunification that a close relationship between the municipality on the one side and the survivors and their descendants on the other side developed. So in Israel, there's an association of former Leipzigers that was founded in 1953, and they motivated and kind of pushed the city to have connection, to invite people to the city to see the city where they were born again. And from there on, it developed a network established with survivors, with their descendants, with the cities, with many volunteers locally, with the current community that is now basically consist of former Soviet people. So over the years, a very close relationship, a worldwide network developed where we exchange projects, ideas, where we meet occasionally, where we invite people to the Jewish Week, to the visitors program. Of course, a city, we know it cannot be undone what has been done, and there can be no justice, but at least we can try to reconnect to show how Leipzig is today, how the city developed, and how we are remembering what happens, and how we try to tell the story to young people that history will not repeat. So the relationship between Leipzig, its former citizens, and their descendants is very close, and it's growing and growing. And I hope that, like with a platform like tonight, with this discussion, it can even be further growing and deepening.
It's interesting. I just want to point out that as a result of this program, and I believe, Sven, you sent out the invitation to descendants or citizens connected to Leipzig, a woman from Australia reached out. It's 5 o'clock in the morning in Australia, and she's not on the call live, but made a point of asking if it could be recorded. And Craig and she have now been in touch, and I think that's it's an amazing outcome for this program and the project in itself, because making these connections are so critical. The next,
just one thing to add, I would be happy if we could promote a further connection, though. There's a Facebook page of former Leipzigers. I can post the address in the commentary slide. So it would be great if there could be further connections also between survivors and their families, and to know the stories of other families.
Yeah, Sven, before you post, okay, because I have some specific ideas, I'll be happy to discuss it with you, and I also want to discuss with Aaron what the next stage could possibly be, so we can further enrich the communication on the project, and also further enrich opportunities for contributions to Yad Vashem.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is for Craig, and it is, who is your family historian? How did you gather all the information about your family members' fates?
Okay, well, again, as the last answer, I had a good amount of material. In order to prepare, I'd say the first initiative was scheduling the program, where we had the 13 people and having all the dedications. The next thing that I put together was my speech. In order to incorporate my speech, which I wanted to give background on each of the individuals that were going to be dedication, I went to my father's book. He wrote a book a number of years ago, which I had mentioned in the video. And also my uncle, Herbie, he had written a book. So each of them have written a certain memoir. And then we have other books in the family that were written, okay, by certain cousins. So I spent a lot of reading of all these specific books. And then I had to put together a chronology to be able to tell the story in a certain continuum from the start of the war until its completion, to be able to have it all make sense. So that was a very, very important, I'd say, way for me to be able to become the historian. I've read the books before, many years ago, I had to read them multiple times prior to this trip to be able to incorporate all of the information. And then to put certain pictures and relationships to make the video much more meaningful, I reached out to certain family members, okay, to be able to put certain things together. And then I also, we reached out even with Yad Vashem, like there was a certain family member, okay, in there, the Peckles. There's no survivors over here. I believe there might be a survivor that he has that's living in Israel, okay, because someone put a historical page in Yad Vashem, and they put the picture in Yad Vashem. So that picture, okay, we were able to get through your resources. So it was a combination of many different things, many hours that were spent by myself and also by the support of my wife.
Here's another question. I think it's a follow-up question to what Sven was talking about what the municipality does. But what is the local culture when it comes to memory and remembrance?
I would say it has different layers. So there's the official commemoration where people from the city are coming, where you have a formal ceremony on the cemeteries or on the memorial for the great synagogue. You have the religious commemoration where people come to Leipzig, where they speak Kaddish for their family, where they visit the cemeteries. And then there's this civil society engagement in groups like Stumbling Stones, but also for sometimes you have in a quarter of Leipzig, like a neighborhood organizing itself, looking for Jewish stories in their quarter, for things that happens. There are different museums and institutions engaged, so it's very multi-layered and has different aspects, so that also different parts of society can be reached, and that there are possibilities for everybody to be informed about what happened and to find individual ways of commemoration, like there are the March for Freedom and so on. March of the Living, sorry.
Are there any other programs that you want to talk about, in terms of the various ways that the city commemorates and it recognizes?
I mean, of course, for me, something very important is the Visitors Program for former Jewish Leipzigers and their descendants, which I'm co-organizing. It's a program the city is running since 1992, where, as I said, survivors and now their descendants are invited. We had the possibility to invite more than 1,000 people by now. Also, Greg's father in the 1990s was one of the guests. And with the help of different people from the civil society, we have a mayor's reception, we have a city tour through the cities, we of course visit the synagogue, have Kiddush together with the rabbi and with the current community. We have commemoration, we see how Leipzig developed. And through this program, really got to know many former Leipzigers. They now also contributed information for a book project about Bar Kochba, the Jewish sports club who in Leipzig celebrates its 100th anniversary in this year. So it really is a great program where there's a high request. So unfortunately, we have a quite long waiting list. But for me, it's really heartwarming to see how people reconnect with the cities they were born in, the city their family came from, and just to see what Leipzig lost when it's lost a huge part of its Jewish community, and how vibrant Jewish life was before, and how Leipzig is now, and that it will never be like before the Shoah of the Jewish life, and that it will always be a lose, no matter whether it's from a religious perspective or from a civil society perspective, from a local perspective. And we're glad that we can meet so many families that are connected to Leipzig and to see how we together can look into the future.
I love the way you articulated how important it is to, 6 million is a huge number. When you talk about individual names and individual people, it makes it that much more relevant and that much more understandable. My question now is for Marlene. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of names and the project and what makes Yad Vashem so unique in terms of recording and keeping track of all the names?
Thank you, Amy. Yad Vashem has a project called Pages of Testimony, which began basically when Yad Vashem was established in 1953. This later developed into the Hall of Names as we know it today, housed in the History Museum. The main premise behind Yad Vashem's educational philosophy is to put a human face to the victim. And by studying the victim and confirming information about each individual, we find that it's a more effective way to teach the subject and take away the fear of learning of such a difficult subject. And it's also a very respectful way to commemorate the victims who perished in the Shoah and the victims who survived, to really remind the world that there was a thriving Jewish life before 1939, and really understand what was destroyed and what was decimated, and how strong the rebuilding and resilience is of the Jewish nation, that it was able to do so.
We have another question. Is there a formal list or inventory of all the Stolperstein already installed? And if so, where is it kept?
I just want to quickly say, I believe I misspoke before. There are 75,000 Stolperstein as of December 2019. They're primarily all over Europe, and Craig and Sven, please elaborate on this. But I also was very impressed to read that there are some in Argentina as well, in Buenos Aires. So now I turn to you guys.
Yeah, maybe for Leipzig, I will add a link where you see which stumbling stones are laid so far, where you can also research for individual biographies. I think there are also databases where you can see a list of all stumbling stones that are laid all over Europe. There's a society working together with the artists, coordinating the layings, but in general, the project is very decentralized. So you have local community groups that are organizing the stumbling stone laying in a particular community, in a particular city. That's why there are different databases and where you can find information. But I think for Leipzig, the webpage is not in news. They're about to create a new one, a more modern one, but I think that can give you a first impression of the names in Leipzig. I think you can also find databases where you can find all the names all over Europe.
So are there any more questions? If you have, and if anyone has any questions, please type at the Q&A at the bottom. We'll give it one more second and then we will conclude. No more questions? I want to just thank everybody. Oh, hold on. A couple of questions are coming up.
I think there are further questions. You just have to scroll down.
Yep, no, they just came through to me. What is the cost of putting in the Stolperstein?
So it's 120 euros, so about, I think, 140 US dollar.
I think it's a little more, actually. I think it's about approximately $200. Okay, obviously it varies in conjunction with the euro. Okay, now it also depends upon certain community. Sometimes it's completely funded by the family, and sometimes because it is done through philanthropic donations, because the municipality will not underwrite it, but they look for certain benefactors to underwrite it. So if in fact they get the benefactors to underwrite it, the community will support it and it won't cost that family anything specifically. In terms of our specific situation, Leipzig did make a donation, but since we had so many stones, we made a contribution to the cost as well.
Yes, so the financing is very mixed. When it's together with school projects, then often it's part that they're running like a cake bazaar or something else, where they sell little things to finance the stumbling stones. Sometimes there are sponsors, like if the victim was a lawyer, there might be a lawyer association collecting money. So very different ways of how the stumbling stones are financed. And each stone is manufactured by hand by the artist himself. So he's putting every letter himself. And whenever there's no corona, the stones are individually placed by the artist himself. So that's what's included in the fee. So the money is also for the artist to come to the city for his equipment and so on.
Right. There's one more request, Craig. Would it be possible for you to put up the list of countries with the stones again?
Okay, and I'll be happy to share with that. 1 second.
In the meantime, we have time for one more question.
Hey there.
So actually, we have somebody who called in from Manchester, England, whose grandparents lived in Leipzig. They were furriers from Krakow originally. So while I don't have a question, I just think it's fantastic that we have so many people from all over for whom this resonates, and there's clearly a connection.
Yes, and okay, let me now get out of here. Okay. How do I unshare?
I think you're good.
Okay, there we go. Oh, now it's unshared?
I think yeah. Did you
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay.
No, listen, it's even possible because the furrier industry was a huge industry and very heavily supported by the Jews. And I know my family, some of them, were in the fur industry. My uncle eventually, after the war, when he went to Lyon, he ended up getting involved in that. And then when he moved to New York City, he ended up starting his career, and he ended up spending I'd say about 40 years in the fur industry. But what's interesting is a close friend of mine who we've known each other probably about over 35 years. And his father was born in Leipzig, and they were fortunate. And I know I mentioned in my story, when I talk about it, how my movie, everyone has their own personal story, and everyone determined based upon family discussion what they wanted to do. So you've had a situation, let's say on one side of my family, my grandmother was the only child who unfortunately passed, and then on the other side of the family, almost all the kids passed except for 2. But here, my friend's father, they left in 1933. And they made the consensus that it was the time to leave, and they went to, first they went to Holland, and then they saw the writing on the wall of Holland, and then they ended up going to the UK. And in the UK, they established a fur industry as well. So it's very possible that the person who you just mentioned might even have knowledge of some of the family members because and friends because of the huge extension that the fur industry had with the Jewish community.
Excellent. Very interesting. So I just want to thank everybody for joining. I want to especially thank Craig and his family for sharing his story and his journey to commemorate and memorialize his family. To Dr. Sven Trachmann for joining us from Germany on his first day back from vacation and offering an amazing perspective that we really are a small world, and for connecting us to Jews from Leipzig all over the world. And I want to thank my colleague Marlene for great context and for background in laying out the story behind the Stolpersteine steps. As you know, as she mentioned earlier, Yad Vashem's been closed during COVID-19, but nonetheless, the work has continued. And over the past 4 months, Yad Vashem has been delivering weekly lectures and programs on Holocaust education, survivor testimonies, the challenges of Holocaust education now more than ever. Tens of thousands of people have been participating in the lectures, and over 8,500 educators and students have taken advantage of the wealth of digital content in 10 different languages. So I hope that you too will continue to engage with Yad Vashem, to learn more about what we're doing to educate, commemorate, research, and document the Shoah and the lessons that we can learn from it. You can visit our website. It's yadvashemusa.org. You can join our weekly programs. We'll add you to the Shabbat message so you can see everything that we're doing. And lastly, please consider supporting our work. It's critical now with everything that's going on in the world, more important. We always say that it's as important as ever. I'd love the chance to speak with you personally if you'd like to learn more, or take a look at our website. There's a donate now button, and I'm very, very grateful and appreciative of your time and your interest and your commitment. And be safe, be healthy, enjoy the rest of your summer, the rest of your day, and I hope that we'll see you again soon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.